Well, in this part 2, I'm going to finish off how to use situational leadership style in 6 simple steps. Welcome to Business Leaders Coach, where we educate, enable, equip, and empower you to become the best leader you can be. My name is Situational Leadership, founder of Business Leaders Coach, and we work with CEOs and leadership teams that are moving from startup to scale up. And on this podcast, I bring you practical steps that you can apply in your leadership today. We draw wisdom from some of the best business books, bring on guests, and also authors of these business books. You can go to businessleaderscoach.com/podcast, subscribe so we can send each episode and any templates or tools that come with subsequent episodes. So in the last episode, part 1, I took you through the process of diagnosing the competency and commitment level of your direct report. I mentioned that it has to be done in partnership, and you must both agree on what competent looks like on each task. Now, if you haven't listened to that episode, please do, because it will make much more sense as I move forward on this part, so that you can also understand your responsibility. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in this episode. And as I mentioned, situational leadership is a very visual method. There's a fantastic framework that once you see it, you begin to understand it better. So you need to go to businessleaderscoach.com/situational leadership 2, right? That's a number 2 at the end, to see the model. It's on 1, which is just situational leadership, and also on 2, which is the second part. As I mentioned in part 1, many leaders come with challenges around how to delegate, and then they'll say it's not working, or team members complain about being micromanaged. And whenever I hear those kind of situations, I immediately know that having the skill of situational leadership, having that under your belt, goes a long way. So we are going to pick things up from where we stopped in part 1, which was to have agreed on where your direct report is, right? This is in the scenario in part 1. We talked about selecting one person, writing out all the tasks, and then rating him or herself while you rate that person as well. I took you through 4 steps. Right, I took you through 4 steps, and I'm just going to quickly summarize each step. Step 1 was that you and the individual first need to brainstorm and write down all the tasks. Step 2 was have a clear competence criteria. Step 3 was assess using a scale of 1 to 4. And I said you need to do this on those tasks lists, and you need to get your direct report or the individual to also rate him or herself on the task lists. Step 4 was then to discuss and come to an agreement. So you need to discuss and come to an agreement of where things are. And so by now, you should have clarity around what you are both agreeing on, whether this person is at development level 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 on the tasks written down. So I hope you're following this methodology, and I hope that this is helping you to see in a more practical way how quickly we can refine and put into practice the situational leadership approach. So we're going to move forward on this, picking it up, and we're going to finish it up with step 5 and step 6. So let's go forward. Just to highlight that I'm actually not going into so much technical detail around how this is officially facilitated, going right into development level 1, 2, and 3, and 4, where we'll begin to look at what's called low competency or high commitment, and we'll define it that way. Because what I have found is that rather than remembering that, people tend to want to remember that. And if you actually just agree with your direct report what 1 looks like, 2, 3, or 4, then speaking in numbers sometimes gives a lot of more clarity. So if I was to use the example of setting clear goals, and if you asked me and said, Toye, on a scale of 1 to 4, where do you think you are? And if I say I am a 2, then you can simply ask, what will move me to a 3? And then we begin to talk about the specific areas that I feel like I need to develop. So focusing on the numbers gives the brain enough information to assess. And that's the trick around this, which is that we're trying to simplify it so that we can use language and numbers to assess and then talk about the practical ways of moving forward. You know, a lot of times you see salespeople that move into management or even a good technician at their job. And what I mean by that is that they are a good individual contributor. They're good at what they do. They're good at selling. They're good at IT. They're good at the engineering aspect of the job. That's called the technical part. And so because of that, sometimes they think that because they're good at that technical job, that they are automatically a 4 in all the areas of management. And that's why sometimes there's a bit of a challenge. And sometimes we actually even promote people into these roles because they're good at the technical job, not realizing that it's actually a completely different skill set. In fact, Franklin Covey did some research and found out that 80% of the skill sets needed are different because they're people skill sets, normally from a technical job. So even if they score themselves a 4, then you can ask them to tell you why they think that. What's the criteria? Have they followed through on the process? And you don't even need to say much as long as you've defined what the criteria is. So what are the ways of how to set goals? What is the way of how you cast the vision? So what I'm saying here is that it doesn't matter where your direct report might think they are. What you as the leader or manager need to do is simply ask the right questions that can provide the awareness or the evidence that reinforces where they really are. And that's the beauty of this. So now that we have a list of tasks, we now need to go into your world and understand how the leadership styles work. Now, in the same way as we assess the development level in 2 areas, if you remember, it was competence and commitment, we are going to assess your leadership style in 2 areas. Number 1 is you demonstrating a directive style, and number 2 is you demonstrating a supportive style. Now, directing is going from teaching, telling, informing, consulting, suggesting, while supporting would mean things like asking questions, reinforcing, reminding, collaborating. So what I want you to do is imagine a 90-degree diagram, like 2 lines where there's a 90-degree angle, with the horizontal being the directive line. And if you drew that line from left to right, we will put low on the left hand, right at the beginning of the left, and on the other side, on the right hand side, you can write high underneath. And so in our 90-degree diagram, on the vertical side, we will call this supportive, and we would start exactly on the left hand side where the directive begins, and we're going to draw this upwards, vertical, and on that line you would go all the way up to the top and you would write high. So you should have 2 lines left to right on the horizontal, and that's directive, and then on the vertical, that's the supportive line, and that's bottom to top, that's low to high. And then if you simply just complete that into a square, now divide that square into 4 equal boxes, and that's the beginning of the whole process. Some of you would have seen this already if you've gone to the website, but I'm just trying to describe what we are trying to achieve. And the simplicity of this is that we're just going to focus on these 4 boxes. So we're going to number these boxes. Box 1 is going to be the box at the bottom right corner. You're going to put a 1 in that box. Box 2 is going to be the top right. That's box 2. Box 3 is going to be the top left. And box 4 is going to be the bottom left. So you now have 4 boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, almost like going anti-clockwise. So this is all you really need to understand how this approach works. Now we're simply just going to add a letter S in each box. So we now have S1, S2, S3, and S4. Now this is where the magic can happen, because if you haven't heard of this, some of you know this already, but just to talk you through how this works. So we're going to explain now the leadership style. So the leadership style is a situational leadership 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm just going to use S1 to describe. So what does S1 leadership style, what does that look like? It's called directive. So this is called being directive. And what this means is that you provide direction, you teach, you explain in detail, you demonstrate, you model, you give the framework, you tell people how to do it, you show them how to do it. That's what using the S1 leadership style is, because the person's development level is 1, which, as we've agreed, is a novice. I don't know how to do this. And so you are basing this based on the fact that this person doesn't know. And it's almost like what I am doing right now, really breaking it down so you can understand the steps. That's a very important part of this leadership style. It is based on the fact that the individual, because your leadership style is based on where the development level of that person is at. So that's S1. S2 is called a coaching approach. And now, just on a side note, the situational leadership model has been around, as I said, since 1969, and it still uses an older definition of coaching, and it actually came from sports coaching. In fact, about 2017, 2018, I got the opportunity to meet Ken Blanchard at a conference where he was doing a speech, and we got the opportunity to ask him questions. And I did ask him specifically that in today's world, coaching is known more as asking questions, supporting, not giving answers. Are you thinking of changing the word in the situational leadership? It was interesting that he said, you know what, that we've actually thought of this, we've discussed it, but it perhaps might cost so much. And he said, we got there first, and so we're going to keep it. So he himself knows that coaching, the definition of coaching has moved on, but that's the box 2. It is a coaching approach. That's how it's defined. But I would say in behavior, you're still being more directive. And so we could say that you are giving suggestions, you are giving advice, you are there to support, because this is also perhaps a challenging phase for the person at development level 2. And you are there to suggest things. So you could say things like, here's what I will suggest. That's the kind of phrase that you can use, because the individual is beginning to have an idea of what to do, but you're there to actually help them still. And as you can see, it's still falling on the high directive line. So that's S2. S3 is called supporting, but in today's world, this is actually what will be called coaching. The behaviors are that you are facilitating the person's thoughts, and you know that they know the answer, and so you need to ask more questions, you need to give praise, you need to reinforce, you need to show them evidence that they know what they're doing, or boost their confidence by bringing out tangible areas of how they've demonstrated things. And in some situations, because at the development level 3, as I mentioned in part 1, the person could be a bit bored, it's a bit mundane, it's become monotonous. You can also have conversations around what is it that is no longer engaging them. So your approach from an S3 to a D3 is a lot more finding out what is going on in order to support, or in some cases you are the one that is reaffirming that they can do the job, and helping them to become confident on the task. Now, S4 should speak for itself. It's where you want that individual to get to. You want them to be able to do it without you having to be there. It is not that you abandon them. You still provide support. You can help them think of ways to do the task even better, or you can get them to teach others. And that's how you can begin to leverage the people in your team that you are bringing up to D4 on tasks, because they can also go and help others on your behalf. So with this definition, here is step 5 that you need to take moving forward. Step 5 is assess your current style. So you need to look at the list of your direct report, the one that you agreed on, and ask yourself a simple question. Are you currently using the appropriate leadership style for where your direct report said they were on each task, or the one that you at least agreed on? Most times what you'll find is that we lean towards using situational leadership style 1, which is being very directive, or situational leadership style 4, which is, we would call it delegation, but in many situations it's actually abandonment. And it's because those two are more easy to clarify, or it appears to be. So ask yourself, how am I interacting with my direct report on these tasks? And hey, guess what? Why not even ask them and get their feedback? That's step 5, so that gives you clarity around what you're currently doing. And as I always tell people, it's a good day when you find out that one of the reasons why perhaps you're not really engaging and getting on with your direct report is because you're using an S1 style or the wrong style. It could be even a coaching style when the person is actually a D4 and you're using an S3 style. Or it could be that you are using an S4 style, but the person is actually at D2. They need more of your support. So either way, let's just call it a good day, because this is bringing you to self-awareness. And if you know me, I would say nobody changes until they're first self-aware. Step 6, so start using the appropriate leadership style for the task. So moving forward, you can both agree on how to start using this appropriate style. And this is what you need to be aware of. So I'm going to highlight 3 things, that the skills that you need to keep on working on in order to use the appropriate style. Number 1, you need to have the skill to diagnose before you can decide on what style to use. And this should be done in step 2, which is partnership. Partnership with your direct report is the key. It's a conversation. A lot of times people go to training and then come back with this mindset of situational leadership and then apply it on the individual who's not aware of this framework, and it doesn't work. Because if you assess somebody as a development level 2 and that person assesses him or herself on a development level 3 or 4, they expect you to treat them on the development level that they think they are. And in many cases, that causes friction and conflict. So partnership is number 2 skill. Number 3, you need to be flexible to move between being directive on one task, being supportive on another, and being able to delegate on another task for the same person. So there you have it. How to use situational leadership style in 6 simple steps. I'll just go through each step one more time. Step 1, you and the individual first need to brainstorm and write down all the tasks. Step number 2, have a clear competence criteria. Step number 3, assess using a scale of 1 to 4. Step number 4, discuss and come to an agreement. Step number 5 that I've just covered on this particular episode, assess your current style that you're using. And step number 6, start using the appropriate leadership style for the task that's at hand. So as I've mentioned, this process eliminates micromanagement, and you now have the vital information to apply the right leadership style for the right situation. Well, as I mentioned in part 1, some of you might be thinking, well, my manager doesn't do this with me. If that's your situation, well, send this to him or her, get them to listen to it, sit down, and then go through it. And if you want to do this with your teams, as I said, do it with one person, ask them, how has this helped? And I definitely would like to hear what that response is. You can email me or you can contact me on LinkedIn. That's toye@businessleaderscoach.com. I would love to know what they're saying about you, because that's the whole impact of leadership, is that they will talk about you around the dining table, and what we want to see is that they are saying positive things about your leadership. So for now, this is Toye Oshimbi for Business Leaders Coach. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already, like and share, and if you are listening to this on Apple Podcast, please rate and give a review. It will help more people find the show. This is Toye Oshimbi signing off, and I'll speak to you soon.